Antonio, one can live a life of moderation by never deviating from the middle course. Okay? Whatever the heck that means. You can be moderate. You can live a life of moderation by never deviating from the middle course. Sounds boring. But then one loses the joy of spontaneity and misses the opportunities that come to those who are occasionally willing to take great chances or to go too far. Okay. Cool. So, if you want to live a life of moderation, then you never deviate from the middle course, whatever the heck that means. But if you do that, then you're going to miss out on some nice things that you would have enjoyed if you had taken good chances, great chances, taken risks. Got it. I don't really know if Antonio's making an argument. The implied conclusion seems to be moderation is not a good thing. And it's hard for me to disagree with him. Marla, but one who, in the interests of moderation, never risks going too far, is actually failing to live a life of moderation. Wait, what? One who, in the interests of moderation, never risks going too far, so never does what Antonio said at the end, is actually failing to live a life of moderation. So one must moderate even in one's moderation. Dude, that is a word salad. But if it kind of makes sense, if you try to be moderate, so you know when it says in the interests of moderation, it's not saying that if you're moderate, if you're trying to live a life of moderation, and by doing so you never go too far or take great risks, which is what Antonio was talking about, then you're not going to actually live a life of moderation because, and notice this is a total side note here, but colons almost always introduce premises. They're very rare on the test, but when they do happen, they almost always introduce premises. Because one must be moderate even in one's moderation. If you never, so remember Antonio said you never deviate from the middle course. If you never deviate from the middle course, then that means you're always in the center. That itself is not moderation because it's like extreme. It's like consistent. You're always doing this thing. Whereas moderation is like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So a little bit being in the middle course, but also having a little bit outside the middle course. Otherwise, you're kind of falling into the extremes. Okay. Antonio and Marla disagree over what? They disagree over what it means to be moderate, right? Antonio said a life of moderation is to never deviate, and Marla says, no, actually, that's not moderation because you're not being moderate in your moderation. Word salad. Hey. Whether it is desirable for people occasionally to take great chances in life. Antonio probably thinks it's desirable. Marla probably thinks it's desirable as well. I mean, she doesn't actually talk about it, so we don't know. But probably. So either way, it's wrong. Because either they both agree, or we don't know what Marla thinks. B, what a life of moderation requires of a person. Yes. Antonio thinks it means sticking to the middle lane. Marla thinks it means occasionally deviating from the middle lane. That sounds like a good answer. I think they disagree. C, whether it is possible for a person to embrace other virtues along with moderation. I don't feel like they talk about other virtues. So that's out. D, how often a person ought to deviate from the middle course. I don't think Antonio is, well, Antonio does think we should probably deviate. I mean, Antonio doesn't come out and say that, but he says, but you'd lose the joy of spontaneity if you do this. So he probably thinks we ought to deviate somewhat. Doesn't say how often, though. So we don't know what Antonio thinks about how often you should do that. So this is out. Because if you don't know what one person thinks, it's wrong. You got to know that one person that likes it, the other person doesn't like it. Either way, though, just out of curiosity, Marla, how often should they deviate? I don't know how often they should deviate. She was just saying, if you don't deviate, then you're not being moderate. Whether you should do that or not is a totally different matter. This is a normative answer versus a descriptive answer, right? Normative is telling you the way the world ought to be or should be. Antonio is kind of alluding to that. Marla is not really saying what should or should not be done. She's just saying what is the case if you fail to deviate. Answer choice E, whether it is desirable for people to be moderately spontaneous. Antonio probably says yes. Marla doesn't say. Same problem as D. And if she did say anything, it would probably be yes, they should be spontaneous. I mean, she doesn't say, but I would think that if she were to say anything, she would probably say yes, it is desirable, therefore they both agree, and thus it is wrong. Answer choice B would have to be correct.